I have a phobia that I've never really shared publicly with anyone before, and that is that I'm scared to check the balances on my bank accounts. Now, let me explain how or why. When I first got started in business, it was really hard for me, and sometimes I barely had enough money to keep the lights on and pay the bills and pay staff and employees and those things, and it caused me to have a lot of anxiety. So I would dread the fact that I would have to check my bank statements and bank accounts. That was not fun for me. But then as I became more successful, I started to have bigger balances and to have more money in the accounts. And then what I would do is I would falsely feel like I had all this wealth, and I'd go and I'd be more loose with my money, and I'd spend on things that I didn't really need, just to find out later that I had obligations on the horizon that I didn't account for, which led to more anxiety. So the minute I was able to delegate that, I did. But the reason why I'm telling you this is because this is what's called the wealth effect, or maybe the lack of wealth effect. And what it's causing a lot of homeowners across the country now is to start feeling like they're not as rich as they used to be the last few years leading up to now. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I was listening to a podcast this morning by Patrick Bet-David, who's really big in the business and finance space. And he brought up this topic, and I wanted to share it with you. So we're going to watch his podcast with a section of it, and I'm going to give you my commentary. So let's go ahead and jump into it right now.
Household wealth drops, ready? $13.5 trillion from January to September. Second worst destruction on record. This is a Market Watch story, page 8. Notice what it says here, that most people's wealth is tied to what? Home equity, right? Home equity. That's going to disappear in 2023 for a lot of people. Let me say that one more time. That's going to disappear for a lot of people in 2023, that equity. I know people don't want to talk about it. Here's the thing. If you're living in a house, you're like, what do I do? $300,000, I have equity in the house. Do I sell it? Do I not sell it? Are you planning on living in this place for 10 years? Yes. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. It's meaningless. It's pointless. Oh, okay. Got it. Hey, what do I do? I got $300,000 in equity. How long you planning on living in this house? Probably another year and a half max. Okay. Worry about it. Okay. Because you got to figure out a way to do something with that part there. So it depends on what situation you're in. We were looking at the rates of a house because my guy flew in Goldman Sachs again. We're sitting there having a conversation. We do our quarterly meeting. And he was telling me, you know what we locked in your rates at? And he says, you know what it would have been today? Meaning people that are buying today, the rate, the difference in payment is not a small, it's astronomically different in payment. Is what you're saying. You know about a guy was paying $6,000 a month. This could be same thing, could be a $12,000 payment for same exact value of a loan, by the way. So you cannot tell me, oh, home's gonna keep the values. They're not. 2023 is gonna be rough for a lot of realtors and loan officers.
Well, let me take a break right there and just chime in on what Pat has to say. He's 100% spot on, because I remember in 2008 when the last housing crash came around, there were a lot of people who were feeling that wealth effect and just felt untouchable and going out and spending money on things they should have never spent money on, right? But from one day to the next, it seems like it was almost like overnight. Everything changed, right? Everyone's demeanor changed. I saw people going from driving $300,000 sports cars to going back to driving trucks, long haul and short haul trucks. Like, it was something straight out of like a movie, right? You just saw people getting rich so quickly. And the same thing has happened in the last 12 months, where we've seen home prices shoot up so much, so rapidly, where all the homeowners are just basically feeling bulletproof, where you put anything on the market and everything's sold, right? Well, now things are starting to change big time, because like Pat mentioned, home prices have to come down, because the same house is costing you 40% more to finance than it did just a year ago. I actually did a video on this, basically breaking down how much more it would cost a person from buying a home last year to buying a home this year and what they can afford. If you guys want to see that video, I'll link it up at the top, but wait until after this video is done and go check it out later. But I want to continue to say that Pat also was mentioning that this is going to be a tough year for real estate agents and a tough year for loan officers, and that's 100% on track. That is true. As a matter of fact, real estate agents right now are dropping like flies. So are loan officers out of this business, because when it's easy and things are just plentiful, everyone hops in. But this is really going to be the culling, or is going to be cleaning out the market for people who really aren't meant to be here. The ones that are going to last are the ones who really deserve to be here, the ones who think outside the box, the ones who actually bring value to clients by being movers and shakers and bringing things to the top. Rising interest rates aren't going to help anyone, but if you can stand out in a market like that, then you're going to do amazing when the market actually starts to get better. But let's see what Pat has to say here.
And I don't think it's going to slow down.
So
I think
Pat,
2024 will be the first year of relief for them.
So what you're saying is basically, I bought a house for $400,000, right?
Yeah.
I made upgrades. I did whatever. It's worth $500,000 now. Now, because what you guys are saying is now the value of houses is dropping. So you got to get rid of this.
Oh, only because rates are skyrocketing. So people, remember, rule of thumb, we've talked about this many times. Rule of thumb, people don't buy a house based on the loan amount or the interest rate. People buy a house based on the payment. No one goes to the bank and says, give me a $600,000 loan. They go and say, I can afford $5,000 a month. What size loan does that qualify for?
Gotcha.
No one goes and says, I want $1 million loan. They solve for payment. So the payment just doubled.
Pat's 100% correct, because when I first got started in real estate, I remember that was one of the first things you learn is that you got to get someone qualified in order to see if they can even buy a property. And you don't go in there asking for a $500,000 loan or $1 million loan. You go in there and you say, this is what I make. These are my expenses. How much can I afford? And then the loan officer tells you how much you can buy. And then you go out there and you start shopping. But unfortunately, what you can buy today is a lot less than what you could have bought before. So what he's saying is that it's just a rule of thumb, because the world only revolves one way, right? It only spins in one direction. So does the financial world. Everything really breaks down to how much can someone afford, and that's how much home prices gravitate to. Not to say that we're going to have prices revert back to where they were back in 2008 or 2010 or anything like that, because incomes have come up. But as incomes rise, home prices sometimes tend to get out of whack. And that's exactly what happened. Home prices have risen quicker than people's incomes have risen. And now what happens when you have that disconnect is that you see the income or the home prices start to come down so they can meet up with the income once again. So that way you can bring everything back into parity or bring everything back into the norm where it should be. But what Pat is saying here is that, or his friend was saying to him was like, oh, what do I do? I purchased this house for $400,000 and put money into it. Do I get rid of it? Well, absolutely, because in this market, if you bought something to flip, which is a very dangerous thing to do, believe it or not, even in a good market, you want to try to get rid of that property as soon as possible, or if not, start making other options, start thinking about other options such as possibly renting it. Okay, what happens if I turn this property now into a rental? Does it cash flow for me? Does it break even? Because there's a lot of advantages in actually keeping properties instead of thinking that, hey, I'm going to sell them and try to get the equity out while I can. Because even if, let's just say you do manage to sell that house, like the example the guy was saying, you walk away with $20,000 as a profit after you pay all expenses and all of those other things. Remember, you still got to pay taxes on capital gains, short-term capital gains. So maybe you end up walking away with like $10,000 to $12,000. Now, did that really make sense for you to spend all that time spinning your wheels, looking over contractors, putting the property on the market, dealing with buyers, having buyers back out, and then putting it back on the market, all of that stuff? Is it really worth it for $10,000 to $12,000? Or what happens if you just rent it and then you can make maybe, I don't know, $300 a month for the next 3 years? And then maybe in 3 years, the market comes back and then you can pull some money out and then you can go and do another one, because then you have an appreciating asset and then you have cash flow at the same time. In 10, 20, 30 years, that property might be paid off, which means that you're in a much better position than you would have been if you just sold it.
Give or take. So the average person's like, hey, I can afford a $8,000 payment, $6,000 payment. So, okay, good luck. You went from an $800,000 home to now a $600,000 home. What are you talking about? I can't get nothing for $600,000. Totally get it. But that's what just happened. But reality is going to sink in 2023.
Yeah, there's something else below the surface here to step on this, is that Americans, we already talked about over the past month, we've talked a couple times about how Americans' credit card balances, Pat, are right back up. Remember? They went down when all that money came from the government, and now they've popped right back up. Well, why have they been popping up? Because inflation, they've been using credit cards for things. And it shows here in all the discussion about the $13.5 trillion in wealth from houses and stuff, there was $900 billion in real liabilities by the U.S. consumer. That is on credit cards. They don't have short-term loans. They don't have signature loans. It's a few people have home equity loans, but the majority of the rank and file of America is $900 billion. And interest rates are going up, so they're paying more interest on that. So the talk about the real recession next year isn't just because, the narrative's off the election, the midterm election, so it's safe to talk about it. It's that this is what's coming. Americans now have as much or more debt as they had before COVID. as much or more before all of the bailouts. Point one. Interest rates are higher. So what they're paying, the interest on that is higher. Inflation has made basic goods and services, gasoline down, I said it, yes, it's a good thing, but everything else is still up and still growing. So I can't afford my life, I'm more in debt, and interest rates are up and be paying. So the spending is going to go down. Consumer spending is going to be dropping, and that's what's going to drop us into recession. When the engine of the economy, the consumer, can't afford to buy things because they're more in debt, the interest rates on the debt is up. You see how that all comes together? It's a simple little puzzle, and that's where it's going.
So let's just say you took a home equity line of credit, paid off this $20,000 credit card, and now you're paying a lot less than you were on your credit card. Now you are in your HELOC because it's over the course of maybe 10, 20, 30 years. It's a lot less, but if banks feel like, oh my God, you're high risk for you not to pay this back because maybe the economy is doing really bad and maybe you reported you lost your job, or maybe you start missing payments on other things because they know this, they have the right to check your credit from time to time. They can easily shut down your credit line and ask for that to get paid back, which puts you in a bad position, which could lead to a foreclosure. So that's something that we all have to be careful with when we take out debt, because going into a recession, the last thing you want to do is, if you're not in a secure place, if you're not in a good place financially, the last thing you want to do is go into a recession with leverage or too much debt that you can't control, because things like this can easily happen. Most people don't even have enough to survive for the next 3 to 6 months. Most people are literally always on check to check or month to month, which is not a good place to be. For the next few months, what you should do is focus on cutting down your expenses as much as possible going into 2023, and maybe even saving some money so you can go and buy the dip. You can buy stocks at a discount. Maybe you can buy another property as an investment. You can do a lot of things, but the time to start planning for that is now. So if you guys want to learn how to do something just like that, I have a course, a program that I just developed where it shows you how to buy properties that are going into foreclosure. If you guys want to know more about that, go ahead and check out the link down below. I'm still offering a 30% discount to the end of the year, and we still have 8 spots available for one-on-one coaching if you need that as well. Also, if you want to see Patrick's entire video from the podcast I showed today, go ahead and check it out right here. Thank you guys for watching. I love you, and I'll see you next time.